now time for the World Brief and, of course, a review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from all around the world. In today's World Brief, we're going to take a look at what Christmas Day has looked like around the world. We begin in Syria, where for the first time in 14 years, Christmas has returned to Al-Qunia. This is in Syria's northwestern countryside. Al-Qunia endured the presence of multiple armed factions throughout the conflict, from Free Syrian Army groups to the Islamic State IS group and later Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and foreign fighters. Around 150 families, roughly 300 people, remained throughout the years of fighting, enduring severe shortages and insecurity. However, since political changes earlier this year, residents have begun returning steadily. The Syrian Arab news agency, Sana, now under the control of President Ahmed al-Shara, has published weeks of content showing throngs of jubilant Christians in the country enjoying Christmas tree lightings, holiday markets, and other celebrations. A nod to the White House intervention that after their intervention, that Shara will respect religious tolerance, a move to rebrand himself as an inclusive leader. Now, although many Syrians will not easily forget the horrors inflicted to them during al-Shara's time as a jihadist, there is now a glimmer of hope that religious tolerance in Syria will not be used as propaganda, but that it has possibly come to stay. Now to the United States, where NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, kicked off its 70-year tradition of tracking Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. And this time, U.S. President Donald Trump joined in. He and First Lady Melania Trump took calls from multiple children. Now, things did get a little bit awkward when he decided to discuss election results with one of the children who called. Let's take a listen.
We track Santa all over the world. We want to make sure that Santa is being good. Santa's a very good person. We want to make sure that he's not infiltrated, that we're not infiltrating into our country a bad Santa. So we found out that Santa is good. Santa loves you. Santa loves Oklahoma like I do. You know, Oklahoma was very good to me in the election, so I love Oklahoma.
Apparently, Santa loves Oklahoma and we don't want him to get infiltrated. Well, every year, NORAD tracks Santa as he circles the globe. I did this last night, by the way. And they do so with volunteers who help to answer calls and provide updates to children on Santa's exact location. The tradition started back in 1955, and it actually started by a mistake. It was after a misprint in a department store led a young child to call a Colorado military command center to ask for Santa's location. Well, Donald Trump and Melania also called the American troops yesterday to wish them a Merry Christmas and to thank them for their service. Now, from a very visible president to one who has not been publicly cited since mid-November. The First Lady of Cameroon, Chantal Biya, has continued her tradition of being the face of Christmas celebrations in her country following her 92-year-old husband's controversial re-election in October. Paul Biya, who has commenced his 8th term as president, extending his rule beyond over 40 years, was last seen in public on November 19 when he hosted the Vice President of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, His Excellency Teodoro Nguema Obiang Mange. However, through Dame Chantal Biya's foundation, she has decided to step in to fill in the gap and spread Christmas cheer to young people at Le Cosinel school complex in the nation's capital, Douala. We wonder whether Cameroonians are looking for their president during this festive period. Let's move to East Africa now, to the Pearl of Africa, Uganda, where the countdown to the January 15 presidential election has left little room for festive cheer as campaigns continue to dominate the national mood. Now, whilst popular musician and opposition leader Robert Chagulanyi, better known as Bobby Wine, celebrated a victory as he was allowed to campaign freely in the Kalangala district for the first time in 5 years without any arrest or incident of intimidation. And when you see the video, you'll see that he was dressed in an armored, in a bulletproof vest and a helmet. However, this is a bittersweet victory for opposition, as the political doyen Kiza Besije will be spending his 3rd Christmas in prison since he began his 20-year run-in with the NRM government. He's currently facing treason charges and has spent over a year in Luzira prison. Last year, he was denied a family visit in prison on Christmas Day. We round up on a much lighter note with a Christmas tradition from South Africa's southern province of KwaZulu-Natal, where a town called Msinga has maintained a tradition called Ihlamvu, where the community welcomes home the breadwinners who return from their lives in the cities to celebrate with their loved ones. The celebration acknowledges how those in African cities are still the lifeline for many countryside dwellers across the continent. The breadwinners parade the streets wearing matching brand new clothes as their families celebrate them. Isn't it amazing how, as Africans, no matter which part of the continent we're on, we have so many similarities and we celebrate in very similar ways. It's about going home to the village. Now, let's take a look at our news headlines from across the globe as reported from the front pages of newspapers. This day, of course, is where we begin, and it leads with reports that President Bola Tinubu has reaffirmed his administration's commitment to national security, unity and religious freedom, stressing that no Nigerian should face discrimination based on faith, ethnicity, or belief. He also called for stronger collaboration with religious leaders to promote peaceful coexistence and urged citizens to travel safely during the holiday season. Of course, we already unpacked this in great detail at the beginning of the show. But, you know, the detail about traveling safely, the question is how many people were actually able to travel given the cost of travel. Anyway, let's move over to Punch newspaper, which is also focusing on the message of unity from both President Tinubu and the governors, and, of course, an echo from the NLC, which rejects unfair taxation. But I want to focus on the Labour Party crisis. Punch newspaper reports that the Labour Party crisis is deepening as the Julius Abure-led NWC has warned Abia Governor Alex Otti, his deputy, and Peter Obi, allies, against holding a parallel national convention, calling it illegal and anti-party. The Abure faction insists that it is the legitimate leadership and will use legal means to stop rival Ninadi Usman Group initiatives ahead of the 2027 elections. This sounds very familiar, doesn't it? It's playing out almost exactly like what we saw transpiring with the PDP. Anyway, let's go to Daily Trust now with this very tragic, horrific incident that took place in Borno State, and that dominates the front page of Daily Trust, where 5 worshippers were killed and 35 others were injured after a suicide bomber detonated explosives at the Gamboru Jumat Mosque in Maiduguri, Borno State. Despite heightened security measures across major cities ahead of the Christmas celebrations, and the report goes into detail about how some of those who were inside the mosque actually saw this individual coming in. They said he was unkempt before the bomb was detonated. So they actually were able to identify the person. But of course, unfortunately, since it was a suicide bomber, that gentleman is now deceased, but just tragic that this is what we're dealing with during this period. To Daily Independent now, that reports that President Bola Tinubu has reassured Nigerians of his administration's commitment to security, unity and religious freedom. Of course, we'd already taken this a little bit earlier. On the bottom of Daily Independent, it talks about the strain, Nigerians feeling the strain of rising travel costs by road. Now we'll move on to New Telegraph. New Telegraph is also looking at opposition politics. Now, New Telegraph is reporting that Afrobeat star Davido has officially joined the Accord Party, aligning politically with his uncle, Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke, and Davido announced his move on X, saying he would collect his membership card in Osogbo. His decision follows, of course, Governor Adeleke's recent defection from the PDP to the Accord Party ahead of the 2026 Osun governorship election, citing leadership crises within the PDP. Now, Adeleke's camp have reported that uptake in membership in the Accord Party has spiked since he joined. I mean, I wonder what the data really says. But the question is, can Accord Party become a legitimate opposition party, one of the bigger opposition parties as we go towards 2026 and 2027? And I think another question to ask as well is, what about those original members of Accord Party who are questioning what this entire transition is about, because there's conflict there as well? We'll now cross over to Kenya, to Standard newspaper. Remember, yesterday Standard had reported pain on Christmas. They're maintaining this theme. Today they're saying dull Santa season. So according to this newspaper, this Christmas season is subdued as rising living costs and recent tragedies have left many families unable to celebrate, dampening the usual festive spirit. Now, one thing that I found quite interesting, we're going to get into analysis now, but one thing I found interesting was that this Kenyan newspaper was actually a lot more pessimistic and morbid than the Nigerian newspapers. I wonder whether there's something to be said about a sentiment of hope coming from the Nigerian media and just trying to be optimistic. The media is often accused of being a little bit pessimistic. So when you see the contrast between the different countries, I think there's a conversation to be had there. We round up with the New York Post, and this is largely because very few other newspapers have gone to print today on Christmas Day internationally, but yet a beautiful front page from the usually controversial New York Post. Today, they've given us prayer for peace. It's a solemn message as Pope Leo calls for a worldwide truce, urging for peace on Christmas Day amid ongoing global conflicts, even as proposed ceasefires have been rejected and some have even failed. Yesterday, we spoke about DRC Congo. So that is Christmas. I try to touch on different parts of the world, but that's what's happening around the world today.
Very, very holistic, I should say, Bimbai. Good job. As regards Syria, you see, this is also part of the hypocrisy of America. All of a sudden, because it favors them, they take a former warlord and they try to put deodorant on him and clean up the stench he used to have before as a jihadist, and they're trying to sell him to us. This looks like a lot of propaganda to me, because this was the same government forces as led by Sharia that were fighting the Druze in Sweden as of July this year. So if you're talking about religious freedom and you were pounding and killing because I remember that incident particularly. I think it was Alex Crawford of Sky News was embedded as a journalist in the middle of the fight, and you needed to see the shooting going on and the pounding of the Druze in Sweden earlier this year. So if you are parroting the fact that you're showing government propaganda on television in Syria, that Christians are being catered to, and you segue that into a conversation around Christmas, then the question we should ask is, I wish the Druze too were given that same treatment in July when they were pounded in Sweden. So it doesn't appeal to me. For me, it's just America trying to do their thing. Yes, they'll make the argument, at least it's brought some level of stability there for a while. But let's see how this stability lasts, because in all of this, too, when you look at the wider conundrum, Israel too is in the mix, defending some local ethnic people out there and Sharia. So it's malleable, but let's see how it lasts. Hope Sharia will not go ahead and be like, the family that left it that is now estranged, the former leader of Syria, I forget his name now.
Bashar al-Assad.
Bashar al-Assad, and not even Bashar, but I think Hafiz, because he started from his father. Then Bashar just did take over from, I think, Hafiz, his father. So they can continue deceiving themselves, the Americans and all of that. I think a lasting peace in Damascus and Syria will be a government that reflects the hopes and the aspirations of the Syrian people as elected by them, and that is free and fair, not something that America pretty much, leads all of us to believe. Secondly, isn't it a reflection of what happens on the African continent? You can see Chantel there with her hair. That's the signature of Chantel, apart from being the wife of the president. But the last time that the president of Cameroon, Paul Biya, was seen after elections where he pretty much forced his way in and is going on his God knows how many term now. Eighth term. The last time he was seen with the son of another man that was high-handed in the African continent, that's Theodore Obiang. And both of them, when you try to put together the years they've spent in power, it's going to about 100 years. So it speaks volume of the African continent. Africa is not free as a continent. As long as you have these very old, sit-tight leaders that their ideas are jaded. They don't have any new ideas. I mean, they are becoming now so traditional, so predictable, so orthodox. They are so predictable, like the ideas are so predictable, like you know you're going to grill chicken on Christmas Day. That's how their ideas have become. And you can look at the indices in Cameroon. The country is not getting any better. So it just pretty much revolves around what we're saying. So we just hope that at some point we'll be able to celebrate a Christmas where at least we can have a new leader for a change in Cameroon. You know, we can have a new leader for a change in some other countries being held by these sit-tight leaders on the African continent. And as regards the Nigerian news, quickly, I just want to talk about something. The gridlocks this Christmas period. I heard about Shagam Ijebu-Ode. I heard about Bini bypass. Many gridlocks here and there. Can we just have a gridlock-free Christmas, please?
All right, okay. So the story in Syria, a number of people would say is a story of resilience, steadfastness, strength. Because if we recall that since the 2011 conflict, there's been the Christians in the northwest part of Syria have had to hide to practice their faith. And talking about religious freedom, religious tolerance, this hasn't been enjoyed there. So this is quite significant, the return of the celebration of Christmas in that area, especially with the significance of a Christmas tree. Earlier this year, it was the Mar Elias Greek Orthodox Church that had the bombing in June of this year. And one of the significance of this is that the people who died were honored as martyrs with their pictures around the tree. And so what this means for me, you know, in that context is that despite the pushback on their freedom to express or freely practice their religion, the people are resilient to ensure that this still happens. And I believe that in this season of Christmas, that's something to celebrate. And it's also a hope for countries who are also facing similar situations to say that the people who are trying to suppress any form of religion would not win. And so the fact that these people keep coming back, there's some sort of celebration, even though it's under heavy security presence, is something to celebrate this year. You mentioned it earlier on, in 14 years, they've not been able to have that celebration in the northwest part of Syria. And so today, as part of our Christmas celebrations, we are grateful that at least, even though cautious, even though still restricted, there's some sort of hope and a show of strength. Look at the people there rejoicing. It is in the face of oppression that has been faced again and again. And that is the spirit of Christmas. The fact that there's still hope despite how bad things may look like. Now, going on to Osun State and the Accord Party with Davido. This is not the first time a celebrity would endorse a political party. It's done in many countries around the world. In the 2023 elections, the APC used that strategy. Recall that a number of actors, singers aligned with certain political parties and even got flack for it. In the United States of America, we know the whole Taylor Swift debacle, who will she be speaking for, and Trump was almost, romancing her to bring her, draw her to speak up for him. So it's used, that star power, that political, that celebrity influence is used to perhaps endear or engender goodwill with the people. However, as we've seen in a number of countries, what happens is that many celebrities align with political parties based on their conviction. And usually they are able to explain the reason why they have chosen. I mean, not in all cases, but in many cases, this is why. It's based on conviction, ideology. But with Davido's endorsements, we want to believe that largely is based on family loyalty and to support his uncle. He has never denied the way he feels, and anyone can choose to support a particular party or candidate for whatever reason. But what I'm going to say is to take it deeper. This might just be also a signal for what will happen in 2027. Are we then going to see other political parties court celebrities to help them to endorse their parties and, like they've claimed, increase the number of people who would follow? I do think his star power would have an effect. I hope it will also bring in more younger voters into the political process, because we need, we have had quite a significant case of voter apathy, particularly amongst the young people. EIE used to hold concerts with celebrities to encourage young people to come out to vote. So I'm hoping that this will also signal an opportunity for other celebrities to see the role they can play in politics. Anyone who is Nigerian can decide to align with whatever party or person he chooses to, but I'm hoping that celebrities who have the star power and influence will use it for the good of the political scene in Nigeria. Get more people to come out to vote. Even if you're not aligning with a particular party, let young people see that it's cool, it's trendy, the Gen Zs, to come out and actually exercise their franchise to vote.
Okay, you talked about Christmas in a political season in Uganda. Uganda is going to the polls on January 15. And then, of course, this is a different kind of Christmas. Ugandans, they call themselves the Pearl of Africa, use Christmas to express joy, to place a lot of emphasis on the family, what they call the sekukulu. That's what they call a Christmas celebration. Sekukulu, in Uganda. And now, this time around, it's not just the normal Christmas. It is Christmas that is being used for political mobilization. So there's a lot of politics in the air. Politicians are giving gifts and all of that. However, the more important subject will seem to be politics in Uganda. We're in a season of late Musevenism in Uganda. He has spent about 6 terms. He's looking for the 7th term, and he's already 81. So he's one of those sit-tight leaders in Africa. And this election on January 15, presidential and parliamentary, I do not think that the pattern will be different. We have seen political repression. We have seen the restriction of the civic space. We have seen the predictable outcome. Uganda is a country where the ruling party always wins anyway. So this next election is not going to be different. But the bigger question in Uganda is that what will happen after Museveni? What will come after Museveni? That is a big question. Museveni, is NRM. There's no doubt will win the next election. And even already, Museveni is anointing Muhuzi, a gentleman called Muhuzi, who is a member of his party, who has been going around that he will hang Besigye and he will behead Bobby Wine. So that's the kind of politics that you find in Uganda, which is also, more or less the kind of pattern that you find in authoritarian systems in Africa. Now, as for South Africa, the celebration that you talked about is coming home. Yeah, it's all about the spirit of inclusivity, diversity, and what they call Ubuntu, or Semukeleli, among the Insi Zulu people. But, it's Christmas is a moment of joy for them when there is inclusion and there is a lot of joy, but diversity and pride. The South Africans, they are very proud of their country. 11 official languages, what they call a rainbow nation. So you see a lot of color in that regard. Very quickly about Syria. To put it in context, Bashar al-Assad was dethroned December 8, 2024. Now, ahead of December 8 this year, you could see everybody celebrating in Syria, not just Christians. They were celebrating 1 year of the fall of Bashar Assad and also the end of the civil war in that country for 14 years. So the general mood in that country, whether you are a Christian or you are an Alawite, is that, look, hope is coming, joy is coming. And it is that the people have carried into Christmas. But with regard to the Christians, now, after the Assad took over power in 2011 and the civil war started, Christian symbols were not allowed. Persecution of Christians, houses of Christians were even seized. No Christian could celebrate during Christmas. They did so inside churches or world places, and they would not allow people to know. Otherwise, the Assad regime would throw you into the equivalent of a gulag. So the fall of the Assad regime was a kind of liberation for them, both at the international level. The United States has always had relations with Syria since 1882, but they suspended it in 2011 and declared the Ba'athist regime a terrorist organization. Now, when Sarah now took over after all that back and forth and he promised inclusion and all of that and religious freedom, the United States, lifted sanctions, economic sanctions on Syria. Trump, when he was visiting the Middle East, visited Syria. 3, Shara's party or movement, if you like, militant group, was declassified as a terrorist organization. Sarah himself was invited to Syria. So all of this gave the people hope. And now on the streets of Syria, you can have people celebrating Christmas. So it's about this renewal, this idea that change is becoming real in the whole of Syria. That is the context. But how far, the United States will go in embracing Sarah, will depend on a number of factors. But that sanctions have been removed is very important. Finally, on Chantal, the Banani woman, that's what they call her fashion style, Banani, with her big wigs and extravagant style. I think it's part of the tragedy that we have in Africa. The last time President Biya was seen in public was November 19, after winning the election in October. The man is 93. He's the oldest head of state in the world, anywhere in the world. And we said it here, that his ambition is to die in office. So it's the people of Cameroon that are shortchanged. In the same manner in which the people of Uganda are going to be shortchanged. In the same manner in which Africans are suffering in many other African states. Again, what we talk about the democratic retreat instead of the consolidation of democracy in Africa. So I sympathize with the people of Cameroon. Even the main opposition man, we don't even know where he is now. He came to Nigeria, he ran to Gambia, he must be running all over the world. Because these sit-tight authoritarian African leaders do not allow democracy to flourish. They do not allow the opposition to work. And that, I think, is a tragedy for Africa.